How you doing today, sir?
Okay, how are you?
Good. Just wanted to follow up with you regarding observation feedback.
Yes, sir.
And what I noticed. And so first I want to give you an opportunity to just self-reflect. And how do you think the lesson went yesterday?
I think it went pretty well. We talked about we're moving in. What we were doing was half of them were working on other work that they had from other classes, and then the main topic that we were going over was letters from the Birmingham jail.
Mm-hmm.
And some people were working, some people came late, and some people worked on vocab from it. Some people were reading the text, and then others were doing the questions. So Ms. Locker was doing some of half of it, and I was doing the other half of it, checking for understanding and stuff.
Okay. And so if we look at checking for understanding, what have you noticed the difference in checking for understanding during the second semester that you noticed the first semester?
As far as myself, what
in
I
the classroom, what the students learned about, particularly with checking for understanding.
Okay. So, like for me, like usually what I would do first semester, would I be like, do you understand it, and then I just go from there.
Sure.
But now I'm asking more questions, pulling more out from them, getting more details.
And why is that important?
So basically, well, for me, I think so they know what they're reading, and so that they truly understand, what's going on.
Yep. And so that's definitely fair. And so I want to commend you on the success. So those one of the things that I've noticed as I was in the classroom. So in making understand that you're a first year teacher.
Yes.
And so, but definitely looking at the observation from the first semester and the second semester. So I want to allow you that opportunity to self-reflect, particularly when it came to checking for understanding and how we can move forward with more rigor in the classroom.
Okay.
So what you have in front of you is your observation sheet that I used in the classroom when I came to observe you.
Oh, okay.
And so what I did is, based on our walkthrough form, so you had 8 students in the classroom, 2 were off task. Okay?
Yes, sir.
So I wanted to make sure that I was very intentional on that, and so that's what we use to gauge our student engagement.
Yes, sir.
Students were completing the activity sheet, and then my push for you there is to ensure that the activity sheet is rigorous for students.
Yes.
And so some of the students seem to be working on it, or let me go back to that, 8 students were working on it, 2 of them were not. And so the 2 students that were off task, you had one who was listening to some headphones set, and then you had another student who had a hood on their head.
Yes, sir.
So just wanted to point that out to you just so you can have your teacher radar.
Yes, sir.
One of the other things that I know is that you did have technology going on in the classroom. The student that was working on the PowerPoint for the Army, he was doing a good job. You did a personal check-in with him, and he was giving you the rationale between the Army and the National Guard. And he said, well, if you really look at it, he said, I might as well do the Army because they do everything
right.
else. Yeah. And so I think that was a good checkpoint. And for you building relationships with those students in the classroom, realize that we have transitioned to the second semester. And so with a new cadre of students, it can be difficult for a teacher to gauge who those students are in the classroom, particularly during these first weeks of the semester, but you had a real good touch point with them, so I want to note that. My other push for you is the objective needs to be more measurable. So for example, you had I can learn content, specific vocabulary, you and your co-teacher, as well as I can read MLK's letter from a Birmingham jail. So if we look at that, I can read MLK's letter from a Birmingham jail. They can do that.
Right.
How can we ensure that they're able to comprehend, analyze, and have rich discussion about that? So how can we bump that I can statement and an objective up so it can be more measurable?
Okay.
What are some things you're thinking about?
I was thinking about like get with a partner and then have that what's it called? Metacognitive discussion about what they've read. What's it called? Gauging viewpoints and ideas and different stuff like that. And making notes about that while reading either while reading the text or after they've read the text, just to make sure that they have kind of like a little bit of check for understanding as while they're reading.
What have you, so when you implement that turn and talk, So you and I are working in a group. We just completed reading a piece of literature. How do you format that discussion where, I mean, you're not talking about the Colts football game coming up. So how would you, what parameters would you put on the discussion? What would your time limit be to make sure that it's meaningful discussion, but it's not dragging on too long? And then what would be your follow-up as you bring them back whole class?
I would say first probably do a limit of maybe 15 minutes. I think 15 minutes.
For a turn and talk?
Yes, sir. Maybe like 15 minutes.
You don't think that's too long?
Is it too long? Oh, maybe 10 minutes then. 10 minutes.
So, let me ask you this, and I want you to monitor because I want you to get it. So, if you give us 10 minutes to talk, and we're talking about a letter from a Birmingham jail, okay? Are we going to spend all that 10 minutes talking about that, or we're going to be talking about the Colts football game and some other things that may get us off task?
Okay. Yeah,
You see that?
Mm-hmm.
So, a point of a turn and talk is if we say we're going to talk about a letter from a Birmingham jail, we would need to format that as instructional facilitators and teachers of learning to say, okay, these are the 3 questions I want you to answer.
Okay.
So what was the mood of the letter that Dr. Martin Luther King wrote from a Birmingham jail? What was the setting of the jail, and how does that relate to the overall writer's purpose?
Okay.
You get what I'm saying? And so those are some really contextual pieces that were embedded in the text that they could bring out. And then I would set a timer of 2 minutes.
Oh, okay.
One for each question, because that allows them to take ownership of that. And then I would say after 1 minute, I want you all to turn and answer those 2 questions with your partner, set a timer, and then when the timer goes up, let the partner return their 2 questions to their other partner.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense? And so a turn and talk is real quick, but it's also measurable, and it goes back to our measurable goals.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we've downloaded that, so I want you to write that down so we can make sure that we get those down. When we're looking at a measurable objective, we had in our objective that I witnessed in the classroom was that students would be able to read a letter from, a Birmingham jail. Well, students can read a letter from a Birmingham jail, but we want to make sure that students are able to analyze, interpret.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
The author's purpose or the tone in the literary piece, Dr. Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail. So that's more measurable when we look at it. So we see that the objective needs to be measurable.
Yes, sir.
And then after we see it, we're also naming how we can fix it, what the disconnect is. Does that make sense? And so when we look at that, we want to be very intentional in seeing what it is and naming it, and then we're going to close the gap. So we're going to watch a short video. And as you watch, I want you to pay close attention to what the teacher says and what she does to gauge rigor in the classroom amongst her student body.
Okay.
And so we're going to take a trip to a social studies classroom in Boston.
My name is Victoria Tyson. I teach here at School Out Walls. Today I'm going to be teaching AP World History to 10th graders. We're going to look specifically at the U.S.'s policy post-World War II. The totalitarianism. We have those things going on. We ignore it for a while. There's always someone. Every class there's somebody who you're just extremely proud of every day. I don't care if it's the worst class ever. There's someone who has made a comment that's amazing. There's someone who has, offered to help out, offered to help a classmate. So I don't really have the days when I feel like this is hard to come back to. Good morning, everybody. Your warm-up on the board. Today we're going to look at the new policies that the U.S. has implemented after World War II, which are significantly different than the ones after World War I. Okay? first thing to do is to look at your Marshall Plan, and you and a partner find the most important sentence in that plan. The one that seems to outline for sure what the new policy is. To help the students who are more advanced, I include the primary documents. I also ask them to find the most important sentence. So what that does is it takes the most advanced students from just analyzing and summarizing to this right here is the one statement, and that causes them to then later be prepared when I ask them to evaluate it. So what is the U.S. trying to do? They're saying their efforts is to do what? Do you believe that?
Yes, I mean, they want to stop, when I read it, I feel like they want to stop communism. It's like, you know how before, it like started because Europe was so bad and so the people revolted and it started away from communism. And this time they're trying to help them economically so that would happen again.
Okay. What happened after World War One? Why would we, okay, three different sides, right? But then between World War One and World War Two, there's something going on here that keeps us from getting too involved in Europe. What big economic event is going on here? Great Depression. Okay, keep that in mind. Today, when they were asked to work in groups, they're allowed to work with whomever they want to. But because I know their abilities, I go around and I ask the questions that are appropriate for the different groups. So the students who struggle a little bit more, I'll start with something that is easy as what are the dates in the documents. And so if you have the same dates, you know, probably the policies are going to be similar. And so the questioning varies based on the group. As I've walked around, I've asked you all different questions, right? Back here, they came to the Martine and Brooke, they came up with the notion that this appears to be bribing. What do we think? I need people to support them so that you're not all jumping on them at the same time. Okay, you two gonna support them? Alright. You all find evidence that this appears to be a bribe, and you all find evidence that says, no, that doesn't seem to be the case, it's just about X.
Okay. What did you notice the teacher saying and doing to promote rigor in the classroom?
I like, that she did she had different, groups doing different questioning, and she also had, based on their levels, she had different questions for them, and then when she brought them all together, she allowed them to, she brought up one group's topic, and then she, had some groups support it, and then some groups, not support it.
Why is that important?
I think because you can find, like within the contents, you can find stuff to back it up and also not to back it up, and I think that goes along with your opinion and how everybody doesn't have different opinions, and then that helps you with supporting arguments and stuff like that.
Because when we support the argument, it's not opinion based, it's what based?
Text based.
Yeah.
Or
Fact based, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's good. So thank you for noting that. So when we look at that, we talked about what the teacher does and what she was saying. What specific language did she speak to? How did she address the students to promote rigor? So you told me what she did, and she did, but what specific language did she use?
Even when she was
Talking to the class.
she told them to find evidence, and then she told them to.
And how did she start off? So at the beginning, she said, "I've given them a document, and I'm asking them to look for what?
What the sentence?
What kind of sentence?
The
Most
most important, I would say, like the theme sentence.
Mhm.
The theme sentence
Right.
that they feel that is most important about the document.
So when we look at that, so I'm gonna push back on the field.
Okay.
Because we want them to get to the textual evidence, the theme sentence that is most important.
Okay.
Because I may say, well, I feel that the third sentence is,
That's true.
but if the first sentence is the most important, I need to be able to defend it.
Okay.
Does that make sense? And so that's the kind of language, and I get what you, so she said she said the most sentence that is most important. I agree with you. If our students are ready, and they are, I want you to find the theme sentence that is most important in paragraph 1.
Gotcha.
So that is something that's tangible, that's something that's measurable, and it goes back to the overall objective. So again, not that students will be able to read a letter from Birmingham Jean, students will be able to interpret and evaluate theme in the literary piece, a letter from a Birmingham Jean.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense? And so when we look for those measurable pieces of objectives, we want to be able to say, what can the students actually do? And how can they get there? Because if I was walking there, I would say, okay, so none of these students could read. Because that's our objective. You get what I'm saying? And so just to make sure, well, wait a minute, I've seen the NWA scores, I've seen the ISTEP scores, so I know that they can read. What are they able to do?
Okay.
What's the work? What's the final product going to be?
Okay.
That's an interpretation and evaluation.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And my last question is, what is the gap that you see in your class, based on what I observed yesterday, compared to the rigor in the class in the video? What's the gap?
Far as ability or just like in general, or
Particularly looking at rigor. So what's the gap in the rigor that was in your class yesterday compared to the rigor that's in the classroom that we observed on the video?
I would say it's lower level.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of lower level, and it's a lot of there's not much I know it's part of Bloom's
Taxonomy,
yeah.
power order thinking.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not a lot of that.
And so that's going to be your push.
Okay.
Okay, because I definitely agree with you. I think it is lower level, and I think we look at where the students are and we say this is where they are, and we have to get out of that mindset. We have to take kids to what I call the magical waterfall, and you have to be able to take them to upon what they can do. So it's that push, right? It's not saying that, okay, well, based on your reading score, this is where you are, and we're at the bottom of the waterfall. We need to take that student, the expectation, to the top of the waterfall, and how, as an instructional leader and your teacher, how I'm going to help you get there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so based on what we discussed, what do you think next steps are in order for you to create a more rigorous classroom?
Definitely, I personally for myself make sure that I am familiar with the text and make sure that I know the questions to ask and also know students' abilities.
So let's stop, let's write that down, because
okay.
you said two. So know the questions to ask. And I think a good teacher does know their students' ability, right? Particularly in your class, because it's a smaller class.
Yes.
And you can be able to identify those. And then, so as a teacher, you know your students' abilities and you know what questions to ask. How would you execute that?
First, with the objectives, making sure that they understand what they're supposed to be doing, and then
And making sure the objectives are what?
measure.
There you go. Okay, make sure you write that one down, making sure that you have a measurable objective. And so, let's restate those 3 action plans. What's the first one?
First one, measurable objectives.
Okay.
And then knowing what questions to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And then knowing the students. And then I would also say higher level
question.
Yeah, handle
Balloon
the
size,
question.
yep. So as we think about your lesson plan, where could we see these 4 components really come to life in your lesson plan? So thinking about the beginning, middle, and end of the lesson plan, where could you really see those 4 components come to life?
Beginning, doing like an overview of the lesson and or outline of the
So
lesson.
previewing the lesson,
Mhm.
okay.
And then in the middle,
And so which one of those 4 strategies could we see doing the previewing of the lesson?
measurable objectives.
Okay,
And then in the middle,
so let's write that one down. Let's write previewing the lesson. We're gonna be seeing by the measurable objective, right?
yes, sir.
And what's the next action step you had on your list?
No, I would say knowing knowing the students,
Knowing the students what?
knowing the students' abilities.
Okay, where could you see that in the lesson?
With as far as like what questions I'm asking them, or who I'm partnering them with, or what student I'm giving what task.
Okay.
Cause I know like today in Miss President Claire's room, we all did we did a read aloud,
Mm-hmm.
and you know some students don't like to read,
Mm-hmm.
and so what we did was the shorter paragraphs and the shorter sentence gives us the kids that really don't like to read as much, and then the students that and then had them, you know, pick on people like a popcorn reading.
Mm-hmm.
That way, it's not like we're making somebody read.
Sure.
It's like you're giving them the opportunity to, you know, get to know each other as well as engage in the class, kind of, if you will.
What major activity at the beginning of a lesson can allow you to see a student's strengths and or areas of opportunity based on their skill set? So if I'm walking in your classroom as a student,
Oh, okay.
what's one of the first things I'm going to do? Usually.
The do now.
Mm-hmm. And so as a teacher, I can real quickly gauge what McKee's ability or his areas of improvements are.
Okay.
So that's another one. I also agree with you previewing the lesson and knowing what your students' ability are if you're going to do a popcorn reading activity. So that you can know and be very intentional about, okay, well, paragraph 1 is longer than paragraph 2, but we still want to offer McKee an opportunity to read. So I'm going to assign him paragraph 2 and I'm going to assign Damon paragraph 1 because he's a stronger reader.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's action step 1 and action step 2. What was another action step that we had identified?
Check higher level of questioning.
Mm-hmm. Higher order question.
Or questioning.
And so, what part of the lesson can we see that implemented in effectively?
After given given the article or given the task that they're doing, walking around, making sure that they are understanding, asking them further questions that may not even, be on the, maybe ask them further questions that may not even be, they might not even be thinking about, as far as like reading, asking them like their opinions, or ask them to find certain sentences that support their opinions, asking them to identify maybe a
And when you
paragraph
say-
that connects with them.
Yep.
Okay.
And again, tying that opinion back to the textual evidence that supports that.
Okay.
So I believe this, and paragraph 2, sentence 3 supports this because it states X, Y, Z.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so that defines of their opinion, but it's also supported by evidence.
Okay.
And then what is our final action step? We said measurable projection, knowing the student's ability, higher order questions. What was the last one?
Checking for understanding.
Mm-hmm. And so we can check for understanding throughout the lesson. We can check for understanding when we have to do now.
Mm-hmm.
We can check for understanding after you as a teacher introduce a topic and you want to be able to assess where the class is. You can check for understanding,
Okay.
quick poll of the class. And then you can also check for understanding with an exit ticket
Okay.
or an exit activity. And so did you all do an exit ticket yesterday when I did the observation? Because I wasn't able to stay for the whole class.
There were questions, but some people didn't get those done.
And then when you all ask the questions, do you all take it up? So like, are they putting it on a sticky note or an index card?
Yes, sir. There's I don't know if you saw it, but there's like a sticky notes on the board on the
Mhm.
side.
I did see that.
So that's what.
That's where they put
Mhm.
it. That's their exit ticket.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so I think that one of the good rule of thumbs were, in order for me to assess that, before you left my classroom, that's how you got out.
Okay.
And so even if you're a little bit behind, I will be willing to write you a pass to your next class, but I need to assess where my class is.
Okay.
So let's hold them accountable for that exit ticket.
Gotcha.
And so I also use that as a talking point to jumpstart my do now for the next day's class. So I noticed when we did our exit ticket on Wednesday, ladies and gentlemen, that 70% of us mastered the exit ticket, while 30% did not. So I want to know what the disconnect is in order to further strengthen our skill set and ability with author's purpose. Our do now is going to be reflective of author's purpose. And I want to see exactly where we are as a class, one, and number two, where you are as an individual learner so I can support that overall learning.
Gotcha.
So I want you over the weekend to implement these 4 action steps
Okay.
into your lesson plan, during a basic skills class.
Okay.
And so I'm going to come back next week on Tuesday to observe you.
Okay.
Okay? And so what I'm going to be looking for is those 4 action steps that we talked about. Remind me what those are.
Okay. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm
you're good.
sorry. Measurable objectives.
Mm-hmm.
Also knowledge of students.
Students what?
Students' abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Higher level questioning, and checking for understanding.
Okay. And so that's what I'm going to specifically be looking for in your lesson plan. Okay. So I'm going to request that on Monday that you have a section either highlighted or bolded in your lesson plan, and that you turn it a hard copy into Miss Williams in the Arsenal
Okay.
in room V.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then when I come in on Tuesday, I'm going to have that lesson plan as a guide so I can see exactly where you all should be.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Very good.
And so then we will have a your second round of observations, and then we could talk about when is another time that we can connect so that we can discuss my findings from that observation and your implementation of what we talked about today with our action plan. And so I think that by doing this on a continuum, that we will have a more rigorous classroom environment, as well as the output would be a better student engagement from our student body.
Okay.
And so I think that they are, the compliance piece is there. We just need to push them academically so that we can get to those higher order thinking questions like you're talking about, dig deeper into the rigor, into our high school curriculum, and then see the student engagement, academic discourse that will be a result of those pieces working together.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay? Any questions for me and how I can best support you? And then my last piece that I have for you is going to be that Bloom's higher order thinking taxonomy with some questions to help you as you preview the lesson plan for the upcoming week.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so what I like about this, if you look on the left side, these are key questions based on critical thinking. We're used to couples answering the lower order thinking questions or those basic questions. So how would you use think in order to transition it into where it's more of an abstract thinking is what changes would you make to solve how tone or the author's purpose is used in the literary piece. Same thing when we look base here at understanding, how would you classify the type of literature compared to moving toward evaluation? Why do you agree with the actions in the literary piece and what are the outcomes? And then from remembering, if we look down here, so what is the definition of oxymoron to what ideas justify the presence of oxymoron in a literary piece? Okay, so we want to govern from the right side. And so this is usually where we start at, and these are the basic ones. These are the more abstract thinking. So we always want to start from more so of the 4, 5, and 6, where it's creating, evaluating, analyzing, and move away from applying, understanding, and remembering. So lower level, higher level. Yeah. Realize that we have to meet students where they are. So we may have to start over here, but we need to be moving to the other side. Yeah. Does that help?
Oh, yes, a lot.
Good.
A lot.
Okay. Any additional questions for me before we conclude?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to reviewing the lesson plan, and definitely if you need anything, I'm here to offer some support, and I look forward to come back on Tuesday.
I can't wait.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. You have a good one.
You too, thank you.